Okay, so basically, this training is about how to teach conversational lessons.
Mhm.
Um, so each day will be dealing with one topic because our training is just very short, 1 hour each day for a total of
Yes.
10 days. And we want to provide you useful discussion each day that you can, yeah, something to bring with you uh, after the training, and you can think about because that's what is teaching mostly is a lot of reflection on our part as teachers. So that's our goal each day to talk about one topic, and all these topics will have, an overarching idea that our goal is to teach conversational English. So what does it mean by conversational English? Example, because Carmen, you mentioned you want to teach academic English, but it
Yes.
does not really say when we say academic English, it's not purely grammar, or sentence structure and vocabulary. Because all these, of course, important, but it may not be engaging and meaningful to students if not put into practice, right? So that's why a lot of methods now at present, the modern method of teaching, they would always say that it should be integrated teaching, meaning all skills are there, including grammar and vocabulary. Of course, there's one particular focus of that particular lesson for that particular time, but the whole idea should be application of the language, conversational way. Because, well, based on history, we've learned that there were some methods and practices in language learning and teaching that are no longer sorry, are no longer as effective as they were in the past. For example, translation method. When we keep on translating in our head, in our mind, that is no longer the best way to learn. Unlike in the past, our teachers will just, teach us vocab and translation, grammar and translation. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that is our goal each day, to have learning about how to teach the conversational way. Okay. But before we go into the details of this, we have to backtrack a little bit to move backward to have better understanding of where we are going forward. Okay. So what am I saying? In this lesson today, our um, goal is to get to know teachers and learners. How much do you know yourself as a teacher? And how much do you know your students in your classroom? I think that is very basic for all teachers. Even in my case, I have been teaching for the past 18 years. Every new class is a new set of students. And sometimes each day I have different mindset of students, because these people, these students are human beings. They change mood, they change character every day. And as teachers, we have to adjust minute by minute. We cannot just think of them as one single elementary students, 10-year-old students for the rest of the whole year. No, every day is a getting to know challenge. Okay, that's why here today our objectives are to identify the job of a teacher, identify the types of teachers, and identify the types of learners. I always begin teacher training with this one because sometimes experienced teachers and teachers who've attended a lot of training, they forgot the basic. They forgot who they are. And according to what's that? Scott Thornbury, a famous writer in the ELT, he said, a lot of teachers and teaching at present, we have lost the art of teaching because of so much things in mind and things to do in class. The art of teaching is gone. So let's go back into the basics. So now let's begin our training with understanding who we are and who we are teaching. Okay. And you may interact along the way. Now, I want you to think back to some teachers of any subject you had in your life, just one, okay? And tell me, what do you remember about this teacher, about the lesson of this teacher, and to what extent do you think your personal style as a teacher is based to some degree of this person or of this teacher as your model? Okay, so everyone, I will give you maybe 2 minutes to think about this question, and I'll call you to share your answer, okay? Your 2 minutes starts now. Okay, so I think your 2 minutes is up. Sorry. Anyone who'd like to share first? Although Carmen is more than ready to begin to start.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe
I'm
we can
ready.
start with Carmen, yeah.
Okay. Well, really, I never thought about this, but now that you have asked, I remember an English teacher when I was in secondary. She was always speaking in English and never taught in and never speak to us in our um, native language. She was always speaking in English, in English, in English. So you have to figure out what was she saying, no? And she was always happy. She always had a smile in her face. And you know, when we have met with her in years later, when we made reunions with our, no, my classmates, no, she continues talking us in English, and no, we were very surprised. So I think that she has influenced me very much because she's always happy and trying to make us learn that we should always speak in English and try to do our best, no? And that's what we, and that is what I would like to do for my students, no?
To speak English to your students and communicate with them in English.
Yes.
Very good. Yes. What you are thinking, Carmen, is what we call CLT in teaching, communicative language teaching, because CLT believes that in teaching a language, you have to use the language. Okay,
Yes.
so when you are teaching English, use English and let your students, as you have said, figure out what you're trying to say. With your hand gestures and your prompts, they will figure out what you're trying to say. That's a very good one. Anyone who would like to share and answer the question?
Sure. Oh,
Anyone? Or is it going to be a one-on-one training with Carmen?
Just with me.
Yeah, so anyone who'd like to, okay, if they're not ready or they're shy, to share. Thank you, Carmen, for that. So having answered that question, let's look at a classroom scenario, a classroom setup. I'm sorry, before I proceed, Carmen, what kind of teacher training have you attended or taken? Like
Oh,
TEFL,
well,
TESOL, CELTA, or?
yes, ELT course
Mm-hmm.
here in Britannico Institute, British Institute,
Mm-hmm.
and also a course about teaching young learners.
Ah, okay. Yes. So that's similar to TEFL, TESOL training, teaching. Okay.
Yes, ELT basically, you know.
Yes. In a university setting.
Yes, one in British Institute and then the other one in Católica University, no?
Catholic University. And that's what, a 1-year program or a short few months program?
Oh, no, they were short. The one in the British Institute was 6 months, and the other teaching for young learners was 1 year.
Okay, that's
And
quite,
then you get a diploma, no?
that's a good one. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at some classes. I will show you 4 classes, and let's
Yes.
see if you can identify yourself to one of the classes, or maybe your opinion about one class. So for example, the first class is Andrea. The teacher here is Andrea. So each group has just finished in this picture discussing and designing a youth club on a sheet of paper, and is now working on agreeing a list of 10 good arguments to persuade the other groups to choose its youth club design. So basically the whole class, they're making a youth club. They're designing a youth club. So each group will present the arguments in class for 10 minutes. There is a lot of noise in the classroom. Andrea is walking, the teacher is walking around, listening in unobtrusively way, meaning not interfering the discussion of the groups. She
Yes.
smiles when she hears good ideas, but she isn't intervening or taking any active part in the conversations, just going around. She answers basic questions when a learner asks, but she avoids getting involved in working closely with a group, even when with one group that is getting stuck. So when one group is having difficulty in, discussing or coming up with idea, she keeps herself away from that. She lets them do the task on their own. So that is the class of Andrea, the first example. The next one is Maya. At a first glance, nothing much seems to be happening here. Maya is sitting down in a circle with her 8 students, and they are chatting fairly naturally about some events from the previous day's news. So they're talking about the news from the article or newspaper the other day. Although Maya isn't doing much overt or explicit correction, after watching the lesson for a while, it's possible to notice that she is doing some very discreet teaching. She is managing the conversation a little, bringing in quieter students by asking what they think and helping all learners to speak by encouraging. So of course, in our classes, there are quiet students, but as teachers, we just don't let them be quiet. So we try to encourage them. And that's what Maya is doing. She encourages the quiet students to speak, asking helpful questions, echoing what they have said, repeating 1 or 2 hard to understand sentences in corrected English. So that's Maya's class. The third teacher is Lee. Okay, so you have, do you remember? Andrea, Maya, and Lee. Lee is standing at the front of a class of 11 young adult students. He is introducing going to as a way of talking about predicted events in the future. He has put up a large wall chart picture on the board showing a policeman watching a number of things in the town center. And then while pointing at the picture, he was trying to create some sentences using going to, and then he lets some students to also do the same to create sentences using going to. And if they cannot make it, then he corrects them and guides them on how to say it better. So sometimes he also gets the whole class to repeat an interesting sentence. So it's interesting that he's actually saying very little himself. So here, Lee is saying very little. Most of his interventions are nods, gestures, facial expressions, and 1 or 2 word instructions or short corrections. So generally, the learners are talking rather than the teacher. So that's the third. And the last one is Pauli. So this is the class of Pauli. Pauli's lesson is teaching some new vocabulary to an adult evening class of older learners. The current lesson stage is focused on learner practice of the new items. Everyone in class is sitting in a pair face to face. They are using a handout designed by Pauli, which gives the learners in each pair A and B, slightly different information from each other. So student A has different information and student B has different information. The task requires them to use some of the new vocabulary in relatively natural ways to try and discover information from their partner. So with that information they have from each other's paper, they will try to share the information. There is a lot of talking in the room, though it's clear that not everyone is participating to an equal degree. 1 or 2 pairs are almost silent, and 1 pair seems to be whispering in their own language rather than in English. Pauli is moving around the room trying to notice any such problems and encouraging students to complete the task in the intended way. So those are your 4 sample classes in English. The class of Andrea, the class of Maya, the class of Lee and Pauli. Now, my question is, which of these 4 lessons resemble your class that you have probably experienced, or as a teacher or as a student, if you don't have much experience? So Carmen, would you like to share which of these 4 examples you have experienced as a teacher or as a student?
Well, in my short time of being an English teacher and teaching some students, I was very diversified in the topics, and I think I made classes using almost everything you have presented, working in groups, teaching them in pairs. No, I think everything, every kind of the classes you have presented, I have some experience. No, and the most I liked was the ones about the projects. No, because the students have to work the whole month, and at the end of the month they have to present their projects. No, and they were in groups. The tasks were about different themes, no, and they had to work all the month on that and give their presentation, no, and each student present a little part of the topic or of the work they have been doing. No?
So similar to teacher Andrea's class, students are in groups creating a project or designing a youth club. Okay, that's very good. Now, we have seen relatively little over teaching that can be considered traditional manner. In the 4 examples I have said, those 4 are, we can say that little explicit teaching is happening, which is the opposite in traditional teaching. Because as they say in traditional teaching, the teacher is the one presenting, showing, talking, right? But in the 4 classes that we have seen, we didn't experience and we didn't see that from the teachers. So if you said, Carmen, that your class resembled to 4, almost all of them.
All of them, yes.
Yes, it means what you are doing is the modern way of teaching. the
Yes.
ELT way of teaching. So good job, Carmen, because you are
Yeah,
not
in very short time.
teaching because you are not doing a traditional way of I'm not saying traditional teaching is bad because I learned the traditional way. What I'm saying here is the new breed of students, especially in language classrooms, they need a new and modern approach in teaching because these students are exposed to media, TV, internet, mobile games, video games, and with that, it has made their learning and their perception about things fast. If we just stand in front of them and we talk in front of them, they get bored. They get detached. They cannot follow and connect with us. So we have to put them in groups, just like when they play with mobile games. We give them chance to interact with their classmates. Although another problem there that most teachers have, like a dilemma, is that when we are teaching, we have to follow a certain structure, we have to follow a certain lesson, and sometimes we don't have much time to do all these creative teaching strategies and methods. Let me ask you, Carmen, are you teaching like a language center or a regular school, like elementary or high school? What type
No,
of?
the one I had the opportunity to work with was a language center.
Okay. At least with Language Center, we can be very creative because we just are
Yes.
given topic and then it's up to us how we can manage the class, right? So that's good. So in modern language teaching, it involves classroom management with little explanations and testing involved because it's more on participation, managing them to be able to maximize exposure to the language, and that's what you're doing. That's very good. So you are on the right track, Carmen.
Okay.
So what we have seen actually, the first class described above involved groups working cooperatively on a task. The teacher saw her role as primarily managerial. So Andrea was doing the managerial role in that kind of classroom setup when students are grouped and preparing and designing a club. The second class, whose class was that? Maya. We saw a teacher apparently
Maya,
doing fairly little that might be traditionally viewed as traditional teaching. Um, we have noticed that something was going on and the teacher was managing the conversation and the language more than might have been apparent at first glance. So yes, this is still modern way of teaching, little participation from the teacher. The third class, Lee, involves a lesson type known as presentation. The teacher is drawing everyone's attention to his focus on language. Interestingly, the teacher is introducing new language. He's doing this without great deal of explicit explanation. So when we teach, especially in your case, Carmen, you wanted to teach academic English. The challenge with teaching academic English or test preparation, teacher tends to explain so much. That is the easiest way. We present the grammar, we present the structure, we present what they have to learn automatically because that's quick and fast and easy. But
yes.
that is not the most effective way of doing it. So even though you are doing presentation, but try to involve communication, interaction among students and teacher and students to teacher. So just like what Lee was doing, although there was one grammar focus to use going to present going to, but he is using a picture only and let students see and create sentences out of that picture,
Yes,
not
he was
knowing
wondering.
that they are talking about grammar already. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So this is one example of presenting grammar. We call it aside from presentation. That is also discovery method of teaching. Uh, and constructive way of teaching. So meaning students are going to create their own, and as they keep creating sentences, they will discover similarities to the structure, and then they will figure out what the grammar focus is all about. And the fourth lesson that we have seen, the learners are doing pair work, vocabulary tasks. The teacher's role was initially to set up the activity, and at the end it will be to manage feedback and checking. So mostly these are the things we do in the modern classroom. Gone are the days when we just keep on talking, whether the students are listening or not. We just go on and go on, right? But in our modern way of teaching, especially in language classrooms, these are the things we have to do on a regular basis. Activity-based, engagement is high, communicative in nature. Okay, so having said that, we can also move forward and talk about the three kinds of teacher. Now, in relation to the examples earlier, let's see if you can, identify yourself in one of the three. So three kinds of teacher. The first one is the explainer. Many teachers, according to this one, that explainer teacher, the teachers here know their subject matter very well, but have limited knowledge of teaching methodology. So this kind of teacher relies mainly on explaining or lecturing as a way of conveying information to students. That's one. The second is the involver. This teacher also knows the subject matter that is being dealt with, however, is also familiar with teaching methodology. So both theory and methodology in teaching, this teacher is using. So we call that the involver. The enabler, the third kind of teacher, is confident enough to share control with the learners, or perhaps to hand it over to them entirely, meaning the control of the class. This teacher knows about the subject matter and about methodology, but also has an awareness of how individuals and groups are thinking and feeling within their class. So having these three, which one do you think you see yourself more, Carmen?
Oh, I would love to be the enabler, but I think I am most the kind of explainer, no?
But when you involve your students to do group work, activity work,
yes,
that is more of an
that's good.
involver, right?
Yes.
Yes. And having the four teachers, which do you think is more of an enabler in the four?
In the four?
Andrea, Maya, Lee, and
of the
Pauli.
four. Oh, the first one.
The first one is more of an enabler because
Andrea.
she let the students be in control of the class,
Yes.
take charge of the class. Which do you think is a better option among the three, or the best? Explainer, involver, enabler?
I think it also depends on the students and the level of English they have, no? Because if they are low levels, then I will have to be an involver, no? But if they can work with the topic I have given them, then it's better to be an enabler.
Very good. That's a great answer. It depends on the age and the language level of the students, because definitely young learners like 6 years old, 7 years old cannot be an enabler. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos in your classroom. They'll be running around, they'll be fighting maybe, and they cannot be put in groups yet to discuss something, right? So what happens to young learners class and maybe low level is a mix of explainer and involver. Hopefully a balance of both. There are times that you explain, and there are times that you give them equal opportunity to be involved. Why there is explainer part when it comes to young learners and low level? Because they need input, right? But hoping that the way we give them input is not so much of a lecture, but more on discovery, like give them short sentences, give them vocabulary, give them pictures, and from there, they're going to practice and learn the lesson. Not so much of a teacher. There's a balance of explainer and involver. But of course, our goal is the enabler. But enabler can only be applied to maybe as young as 10 years old, someone who's already can manage himself or herself within a group of students and can carry a conversation, a simple conversation, and can discuss to other students. So that's a very good answer, Carmen.
Oh, thank you.
Age dependent and level dependent.
Age dependent and level dependent.
Now, that is on the part of the teacher. I think Carmen is more knowledgeable about that. Now, let's get to know the learner now.
The learner.
Yes. Can you tell me, Carmen, what is the first and foremost job of a teacher in the classroom? Have you encountered this question before? What is the first and foremost job of a teacher?
I don't know. Know her students.
Very good. Wow. You really have that teaching skill, Carmen. You've learned. I commend your British Institute and then Catholic school that you attended to, because you've learned from them. Yes, that's a very good one. I learned this answer from this question from a priest. He was our education ministry, secretary of education. We call it secretary of education. So she's the head. He was the head of the whole educational institution in the Philippines. And to him, he said, many teachers fail to recognize their job in the class because a lot of them are too preoccupied and busy preparing lessons, preparing visual aids, beautifying the classroom, etc., failing to recognize their first and foremost job, which is to know and understand the learners. Because if the teacher fails to know and understand the learners, everything will be a failure, right? Because how can you create an effective lesson plan and lessons if you don't know your students? How can you make fun, engaging activities if you don't know your students, right? There are a group of students maybe who don't like so much listening, but you keep teaching them listening the traditional way. So definitely students will resist learning this way because that's not how they are learning. That's not how they can learn best. So the basic role, the first and foremost job that we teacher must do is to understand who our students are, their strengths, their weaknesses, their personality, their background. But the question is how soon we should get to know them. Every day, as they say, is a getting to know activity with your students, because learning to understand your learners may take a whole lifetime, but at least you try learning and knowing them day by day. That's very important. Okay, good job. That's a good answer.
Okay.
So, however, in our getting to know of our students, I will focus more on the sensory preferences, okay? According to neurolinguistic programming, so humans learn differently in different ways. There are people and there are students who best learn through hearing. These are the type of learners who just want to listen to lectures, and because they are auditory learners. There are also those who learn best when they see things visual, okay? There are also students who learn best when they can touch and feel physical objects, and these are the kinesthetic learners. So, having said that, when planning classes, you may naturally, this is a caution to
Yeah.
teachers, you may naturally bias your lesson towards your own sensory preference. So, example, this is, I'm guilty of this because Carmen, I am a visual learner. As a person, as a student, I'm a visual learner. I love to see a teacher who stands in front, do some movements and write on the board, and present visuals. I learn best with that. I feel bored and sleepy when the teacher just stand in front and keeps talking and will just play an audio or something. There's no interaction. I can't learn with that. So, which means when I became a teacher, I always, and my student noticed this, would ask me, teacher, why do you always begin your class with a picture? Why do you always begin your class with a graph, there must be a visual, there must be something that I can see and present to students. And my student told me that, and I realized because that's my bias. I'm a visual learner, therefore I became a visual teacher. How about you, Carmen? What kind of learner are you? And is this affecting the way you teach?
Yes, well, I am also a visual learner, undoubtedly. And now the times are for using visual, no? Because using the internet, no, and all the facilities we have there, no? I love using YouTube, no, the slides, Google, no, everything. I love to start my classes using a picture or something visual that catch the students' attention, no. And I think the best way is using visuals, no.
So, have you also considered if your students are visuals?
Well, I think that now everyone has their cell phones, no? And I think they are using visuals all the time. Perhaps listening to music is another way, no? But using their audios. But I think most of the students are visuals, no?
But have you tried to discover if they really are visual? That's what you think, and that's maybe your assumption.
I'm thinking about that, but I think they are visuals, no?
Okay.
Unless you present a project and they have to investigate, and probably you show just some pictures and that's it, no? But they also like, for example, to try new games, no? To play in the class, no?
That's good. So which means as teachers, for us to know them, if they really are visual, they are auditory, kinesthetic, we have to involve different kinds of activities in our classrooms. And we can see from the output, the results, who are more likely to excel in activities that involve movement. So these are the kinesthetic type of learners. Those who are good with listening activities, fill in the gaps activities, maybe the auditory, and the visuals are the ones with presentation. And when you try to let them create an output that they are going to present. The reason why I share this because I had one student every time because I begin my class with, aside from pictures, games. And my one girl, a 9-year-old girl, told me, teacher, I don't want to join with your game. I was so heartbroken when a student told me and she doesn't want to join in a, it's very rare for a student to say, I don't want to join with your games. I just want to sit. So the initial reaction was I was heartbroken. I was hurt when the student said, of course, I didn't show it, but deep inside, I said, oh my God. So maybe she doesn't like my games. Maybe my games are boring, But later on, I figured out Yes, I almost forgot. There are different kinds of learners. So I should not react that way. I should try to understand this student, that this student cannot perform well or doesn't want to explore this kind of activity because that's not who she is, right, in learning. So instead of ignoring her, I should try to discover what's her strength. And so I gave her a worksheet and she loves it. So she's into worksheets and just doing that by herself. So we call it differentiated activities. So there may be some students who will do different activities, others are doing other activities, but having the same output and goal. Maybe it's a vocabulary activity, others are playing the vocabulary, others are just answering worksheets, and you are achieving the same goal with two different kinds of mode of performing the activity. We call it differentiated activity.
Differentiated activity.
Many teachers don't do this. Why? It's tiring. It involves a lot of preparation when you do differentiated activities because you need to identify who are these students who like visuals, who are these students who are auditory, who are these students who like to move around, because you want to try to, from time to time, give them activities that suit their skills and strength. Otherwise, if you keep giving them worksheets, the kinesthetic students will always fail, fail, fail. So the traditional, for example, way of teaching, we can see and say many students are not good, but that's actually a wrong decision or a wrong way of labeling that they are not good. Maybe we fail to give them a chance to excel in other activities. So we have to involve different activities in our lessons. Yes. So even though we are presenting vocabulary, it can be presented in different ways. Even though we present grammar, it can be presented in different ways, involving and having in mind the different learning styles of students. But again, many teachers just don't try to touch this part because it's tiring. So in my class, to share a little, in my classroom, I have different, of course, I have different, for example, we're using different books. So unit 1, I have pictures, I have vocabulary, I have worksheets, and I have activities or games. So whenever I teach a class, I identified who these students who don't like playing games, because no matter how we play games, they cannot get good score with a game. They just feel frustrated because they cannot perform well with games. So I don't involve them, and I give them worksheets. So I have worksheets for them automatically that I can give. But this one I prepared over the years. So as you keep teaching, you keep materials with you, recyclable materials, which you can just get from your envelopes and give it to them. Which
At
becomes
the right time.
yes, at the right time. That's very good. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Now, how do we train students? In our classrooms, there are 3 ideas to start learner training. Okay, when we say our goal is to understand them and to know their strengths and weaknesses, but at the end of the day, we are teaching. We are the teacher, and they are the students. They must do something, and it's not just good that we go to what they are good at. So we must do something in our class. So there are 3 ideas to start training them as a learner. The first one is to integrate study skills work. A simple one here is looking up information in a dictionary, researching, finding it themselves, interviewing, asking, answering. So there must be doing this in our classroom. Okay, not just teacher spoon feeding them, giving them all the information they need. Sometimes a teacher, I don't know this word, and then automatically you are just going to give them the answer. No, don't do that. Train them to be able to become independent learners in the classroom. Must have the study skills, that they can, perform something on their own. That's number one. Are you doing that, Carmen?
Well, when I have let them use their cell phones to look for new words,
Okay.
no?
So
Yes.
that's one. That's an example of study skills work. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
The second one is let them into the secret. What does it mean? Teachers sometimes prefer the surprise approach to teaching methodology. Like the students will just be, caught off guard or surprised because that's what you're doing in the class. But here we are told to be, let our students be informed of what's going to happen. Okay, don't let them just guess or find out what's going to happen. Be transparent to your students. So what does it mean in a classroom? Tell them what's going to happen. And this usually happens in the first part of the lesson, in the opening routine, after the greetings, after the checking of attendance, etc. Then you say, okay, class, today we're going to study Unit 1, for example. And in Unit 1, our goal is reading. And in reading, there will be some vocabulary activities. There will be true or false questions that we will answer. And we'll have some games that involve vocabulary and grammar. So this is what we mean by let them into the secret. Let them know what's going to happen in the class and why. Why are we doing this? So many students don't like or don't understand why they are in your class, especially English students or learning English. One of my students told me, teacher, I'm Vietnamese. Why do I have to learn English? My mom just brought me here and put me in your class, but I don't know whether I need English in the future or not. So the student doesn't know why he or she is in the class. So give them that answer, why, and explain why things are going to be like this in your classroom, in your classes, so they will better understand, right? Many students don't like English because they don't understand why. But if you give them that idea, this is what we're going to do, they'll be excited because there are games, and then they'll understand that part of, learning reading, there must be vocabulary. So they don't just hate you because you give them spelling activity. You give them fill in the blanks activity using vocabulary. So at least they know why. And the third idea is to discuss process as well as content and procedure. Meaning, of course, when we are teaching, there is content, there is procedure and process. And these, well, depending on the age, again, of the level, but at least students are involved. They have the say on how to do things. So sometimes I normally ask them, what are we going to do? Like, there is one day of that week that they can choose what activity they like to do. So I involve them with a procedure. Of course, I guide them. I don't just fully let them do it because they might not really do it, but they are going to be part of it. Okay, and at the end of the day, sometimes, not sometimes, but in my lesson structure, there is always this part towards the end that I ask them, what did we do today? It's a kind of reflection of what transpired, what happened the whole 50-minute class. Because sometimes with the many activities that we present in class, students are drowned and overwhelmed. And when they go out, they forget everything. So at the end, I just reinforce and highlight, what did we study today? And then we go back to writing the information on the board. Like, we are going, so teacher, today we studied reading. And in reading, we learned a few vocabularies, and then these are examples. So at least that's being reinforced towards the end and before they go out, because some parents are waiting outside And when they ask their child, what did you do in class? Maybe they will think we played games. And so they might get angry at you because the answer was just playing games, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you do that, if you involve them, if you give them some time to reflect at the end, then learning is reinforced, and it is more, meaningful and easier to be retained and be remembered. So you clarify what is happening and what has happened.
Yes.
Okay. So that is what I wanted to share with you tonight about teachers and learners. The lesson that we have today is from Teaching Learning, third edition of Jim Shrivener. I find Jim Shrivener's lessons in teacher training a lot practical and easy to follow ideas. So he's one, as a teacher of English, we have one bias to a kind of educator that we want to, follow and as our role model. And Jim, there are quite a few I follow. One is Jim Shrivener. Another one is, what's that? ESA. Another one, Scott Thornbury, because of his new ideas. Scott, SCOTT, Thornbury, THORNBURRY. And Jeremy Harmer is the third one.
Yes.
Jeremy Harmer.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of these names?
Yes.
Yeah, so
yes, Jim Scrivener also.
So these three are the people I follow and I read their materials. Questions, Carmen?
Question.
Poor Carmen.
Yes.
Yeah, Carmen is my best student tonight.
And the only one.
Well, we have Georgette, Alejandro,
Yeah.
González.
I'm here. I'm watching everything. Honestly, Ace, good evening.
Oh,
It's good
Louis.
to see you.
It's you. I didn't recognize your name. Yes, I thought it's another
Yes,
Louis.
it's me. No, it's me. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. So yeah, this is about teachers and learners, or teacher and learner. Question, Carmen, before we probably wrap up and end the session tonight?
Well, when you talk about differentiated activities, using differentiated activities in every lesson, or
ideally,
no?
it should be in every lesson. In each lesson, you must do differentiated activities if you want to, if you are considering different learner preferences. But as I have said, this is ideal because in the real world, this is difficult to do, which means you have to prepare. If you have 3 sets of group of learners, you must prepare 3 sets of activities every time. So many teachers don't do this in real world teaching. So what they do, instead of differentiated activities, they do the pair group strategy, the weak and the strong students. So at least they can help each other. So weak and strong students pair, weak and strong students pair. So if one is, struggling, the other one can help.
Yeah,
so you don't have to prepare different activities by that.
But probably you can make that 1 or 2 times during the week, no?
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's your choice if you want to. In my case, I try to have focused lesson per day and also target a group of students that day. For example, Monday, because Monday is always difficult to speak day, so I focus more on conversation and visuals. So they don't do so much writing or listening, just more visuals and communication. Then, because our class is just 3 times a week, so Wednesday, we do more of listening and writing, but still there is speaking involved. So now I'm targeting the auditory. So yeah, each week we have different, target so that those other learner styles will not feel neglected. They can also, perform and show their strength. Otherwise, you would notice that you have an imbalance scoring. For example, this student is always low. And if you can check why it's low, because he is low in worksheets and grammar activities. There are students like that, and you would notice that on your class record. But if you ask them to perform, these students can excel, and therefore you're giving justice to that kind of student. So that's how we do it. Of course, yes, it's up to you.
Excellent. Well, no, I don't have more questions.
Okay, Lillian.
Okay.